Join us on this 9.5 miles kayak on the Wales coast from Barry to Cardiff Bay on the 21st of June 2025. Watch on to learn about the historic port town of Barry, what it's like paddling this section of the Vale of Glamorgan coastline, the Sandbanks Style Optimal kayak and the Hiqmar efin electric kayak motor that we used on this trip, the pleasant seaside town of Penarth, and one of Europe's largest waterfront developments at Cardiff Bay. This 9.5 miles route on the Vale of Glamorgan coast took us from Barry to Cardiff Bay. We launched from Knap beach at 12 noon and paddled past the historic port town of Barry. After passing the village of Sully, we stopped for a lunch break on Sully Island. We rounded Lavernock Point and paddled along Penarth beach with its iconic pier before landing on the west side of Cardiff Bay at 4 p.m. We parked up at the Knap Terrace car park overlooking Knap beach on the west side of Barry. We inflated our Sandbanks Style Optimal kayak and set up the Hiqmar efin kayak motor by attaching it to the skeg slot and bungeeing down the battery to the rear deck. We had the usual pre-launch photo before launching from Knap beach at Barry. We launched from Knap beach at 12 noon and headed eastwards. Just behind Knap beach are the remains of a Roman villa consisting of 22 rooms and cellars around a central courtyard believed to be a 3rd century building associated with naval activity, maybe a supply depot. Although it was humid and about 24 degrees Celsius, we were subjected to intermittent showers as we paddled eastwards past Barry's waterfront. Barry Island is today known for its large funfair. Up until the 1800s, it was a tidal island separated from the mainland by an estuary. Barry Island was known to be a Viking raider base in 1087, and if we'd been paddling past it back then, our kayak may well have come under attack from Viking dragon ships. We passed Nell's Point and Jackson's Bay and then paddled by the lighthouse marking the entrance to Barry Docks. The town of Barry grew significantly from the 1880s with the development of Barry Docks, which in 1913 was the largest coal port in the world. On this trip we used a Sandbanks Style Optimal tandem inflatable kayak. It's made from drop stitch construction, so it inflates to a high pressure of up to 12 psi. I've done a full review of the Sandbanks Style Optimal kayak on the product reviews playlist of my channel. I found the Sandbanks Optimal to be sturdy, stable and reliable, and it's one of my favourite kayaks for sea kayaking. Ahead of us, Sully Island slid closer, with the islands of Flatholm and Steepholm brooding in the distance. The village of Sully is understood to be named after the noble Norman family of Baron Reginald de Sully, one of the 12 Knights of Glamorgan, who was awarded the manor around 1093 by the conqueror of Glamorgan, Sir Robert Fitzhamon, probably under charter by William II of England. Sully Island is a small tidal island of about 14.5 acres. Access to the island is on foot at low tide from the car park of the Captain's Wife pub. A rocky causeway connecting the island to the mainland is uncovered for approximately 3 hours either side of low tide, the island being cut off from the mainland for the rest of the day. A tide table is displayed to indicate when it's safe to cross. During the 13th century, Sully Island was the base for Alfredo di Marisco, a Norman pirate known locally as the Nighthawk. In the Middle Ages, Sully Island was well known for its involvement in the local smuggling trade. We were a bit worried because the tide was funneling between the mainland and Sully Island and creating a stretch of rough water. It was difficult to gauge how rough this tide race was until we started to paddle through it. Fortunately, it turned out to be not so bad, and we've certainly paddled through a lot worse tide races in our time. We headed towards a shingle beach on the east side of the island, where we planned to have a lunch stop, given that we were now almost halfway along the 9.5 miles route between Barry and Cardiff Bay. The showers seemed to have died out, and the early afternoon sun was starting to burn the clouds away as we approached Sully Island. We were looking forward to our lunch break, and even more looking forward to our bottles of cider. In the background you can see the Captain's Wife pub, which is a great waterside pub overlooking Sully Island. This footage looks back from the island towards the hamlet of Swanbridge and the Captain's Wife pub. This view looks eastwards towards Lavernock Point, with Penarth and Cardiff way in the distance. This is the view looking back westwards from Sully Island towards Barry, with the village of Sully on the right of picture. We had a lunch and cider stop on Sully Island, where we got talking to a lady who was camping on the island for a week. She was quite a character and seemed to be glad for the company. A group of oyster catchers circled around as we set off from Sully Island. They are relatively common on most parts of the Welsh coast. Invigorated after our lunch stop, we continued eastwards towards Penarth and Cardiff Bay. The island on the left is Flatholm and the island on the right is Steepholm. The Vikings took refuge on Steepholm during the summer of 914 and then carried out raids on the coast of Somerset according to the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle. We approached Lavernock Point, which is treated by some sources as the boundary between the Severn Estuary and the Bristol Channel. On the 13th of May 1897, the Italian-born inventor Guglielmo Marconi, assisted by George Kemp, who was a Cardiff-based post office engineer, transmitted and received the first wireless signals over open sea between Lavernock Point and Flatholm Island. As we rounded Lavernock Point, we saw a couple of sea kayakers who were not far behind us. The sea had been quite choppy on the west side of Lavernock Point, but was noticeably flatter on the east side of the point. We were joined by the two sea kayakers and turned off our motor and had a good chat with them as we paddled along. We learned that they were doing a paddle from the east side of Barry to Penarth and back, a distance of just over 12 miles. Shout out to Chris Kitch and David Williams. We were intrigued by their stories of their sea kayaking trips and learned a lot from them. They'd been struggling to catch us up and wondered how we were going so fast until I confessed that I had an electric kayak motor. We'll always use the surfforecast.com website to check the sea conditions before we go. On the day of this trip, the swell forecast was only 0.1 metres every 9 seconds. The wind forecast was about 10 miles per hour to 15 miles per hour from the southeast, swinging round from the south. It was high tide at 3:50 p.m. and it was a 9.46 metres tide at Barry, which seems to be roughly halfway up the tidal range. The southeast Wales coast becomes increasingly tidal the further east up the Severn Estuary you go, and I recommend only paddling this part of the coast in the same direction as the tide is running. We approached Penarth Beach, which was busy with people enjoying the Sunday afternoon sun. Penarth Pier stands majestically looking out over the Severn Estuary. Penarth Pier was opened in 1898. It has on several occasions been damaged by vessels colliding with the structure, so we took care as we paddled underneath the pier not to add to its list of maritime accidents. As we approached Penarth Head, Cardiff loomed into view in the distance. The Hiqmar efin kayak motor that we used on this trip slides into the skeg slot on the hull of the kayak. The battery can either be stowed on the floor of the cockpit of the kayak or tethered down to the rear deck. You control it using a wristband which connects wirelessly to the motor. The Hiqmar efin kayak motor has 3 modes. Drive mode propels you along at about 2.5 miles per hour or 4 kilometers per hour. The battery will last about 4.5 to 5 hours when used continuously in drive mode. Sport mode pushes you along at about 4.5 miles per hour or 7.5 kilometers per hour. The battery will last 1.5 to 2 hours when used continuously in sports mode. Reverse mode propels you slowly backwards. I mostly use the motor in drive mode, but use sports mode if I'm in a rush or have to paddle against a strong current or wind. You still paddle as much when using the motor, so it's a bit like the kayaking equivalent of e-biking. This journey was part of my undertaking to paddle every section of the 870 or so miles of the Wales coast. I'd paddled just over half of the Wales coast at the time of me doing this trip in June 2025. The port of Cardiff on the right and Cardiff Bay on the left came into view as we rounded Penarth Head. We pulled in to make way for a tanker which was coming out of Cardiff Port. It was a bit bigger than us, so we didn't want to get into any arguments about whose right of way it was. We made the final push towards Cardiff Bay. The Cardiff Bay barrage sprawled ahead of us, laying across the mouth of Cardiff Bay between Queen Alexandra Dock and Penarth Head. The barrage was completed in November 1999, separating the 500-acre lagoon from the Severn Estuary. While boats can pass through a lock in the barrage, it's not possible to kayak into Cardiff Bay from the sea. We have kayaked Cardiff Bay on many occasions, and it's a great location to paddle when it's not too windy. The barrage means that the Cardiff Bay Lagoon is not tidal, so you can paddle it at any time. On the right you can see the Mermaid Quay development, which is the heart of Cardiff Bay. The high-rise buildings of Cardiff's city centre can be seen in the background. The Taff River flows into the bay at Grangetown and is a nice river to paddle through the city. On the left, Penarth Marina comes into view with a boat-lined Ely River flowing into the bay on the left-hand side. At 4 p.m. we landed on the small beach on the west side of the Cardiff Bay barrage. If you enjoyed the video, then please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing by clicking on the left below. Click on the right below to be taken to the playlist of videos of my other trips around the Wales coast.